Yes, we can. Excellent. We are live. Good evening, everybody. See a couple people in chat already. 2 p.m. and numero 80. But to all you watching post stream, welcome as well. Episode 61, sorry, of the Leonis Report. JB and I back again on this Monday night. We do not have any news yet today, but we do know what's coming, so we got a good lineup of stuff. But before we dive in, what's going on, man? How's it going?
It's going good, going good. Always great to be here. It's the Monday night ritual we've come to do over the past year, so always look forward to it. Had a good weekend, It's my family's actually away, so I've been kind of on my own, kind of just going back to my bachelor days here, doing a lot of gaming, doing a lot of movie watching, and yeah, it's been a kind of a good respite. How about yourself?
Very nice. It was good. It flew by in the blink of an eye. I played, no lie, like 15 hours of Final Fantasy 14 since Dawn Trail dropped, and so spent nearly the entire weekend doing that. It's been a lot of fun, and obviously War of the Visions is sprinkled into that. And other than that, it was not a good weekend anyway. It was pretty rainy, so I don't feel like I missed out on much. But we have Thursday off from work, I imagine, with 4th of July, so nice little short week here to still kind of keep things casual in the onset of the summer.
Yeah, me and my family are going up to New Hampshire, Lake Winnipesaukee, going to do some camping over the 4th. Go do the fireworks up there, and yeah, camp out and enjoy the outside. So looking forward to that. The Final Fantasy 14. I know that a decent portion of our player base has been kind of somewhat AFK from WOTIF. While this new Dawn Trail expansion has come out. So that's kind of typical, when some of the past expansions have come out, so the game gets a little bit quieter because obviously, there's a lot of overlap between the player bases, and that MMO has been, so good for Square and for Final Fantasy at large.
It is absolute breadwinner, and it does so much to really like. And it's part of the Evilise Alliance, which is kind of cool. That of their flagship series, it's one that really does have some roots to like tactics and all these games that we typically love. And nice to see that that has the support of the fan base. To answer some of the questions in chat, I'm part of the Fairy server on the Aether data. I don't remember what the database is, but I'm on Fairy. So, yeah, a lot of people playing. It's been really cool to kind of be able to cross collab with some of our friends to play different games. But yeah, we'll get back to War of the Visions in the meantime. Tonight, a couple things to talk about. And again, despite any notice this morning, we do know that Lucille is coming out. And we'll be honest, our prediction, I think you looked at the schedule of Viz login rewards. I think you thought that maybe next week, we might not even get one this week for an update. So we might
Yeah.
be premature on this, but we do know she's the imminently new unit, and she's dropping with her vision card in the same week, provided that we stick to the same schedule as JP. So a little irregular on that crunch of putting the unit and vision card together. We'll talk about both. We will do a little comparison here to her and Fina, White Lotus or White Mage, yeah, White Lotus Fina as well, who you know, two very powerful supports in their own rights for different reasons. We'll compare the both of them. We'll talk about Supremacy that just ended and give some shout outs to the guilds and talk about our experiences. And you don't get this very often to say culminate the rankings and bring everyone together. So at least dedicate some time. And we'll talk about the new Guild War map that's coming out on the next patch as well, just to kind of get ready for what might be ahead. There's also the Reincarnation Festival, which was announced, which we do get to vote in. So we will go through a little exercise here. We'll give some yays and nays and who we're voting for and who's worth it, who's not. We'll talk about Shurrek. I feel like I keep forgetting her name, but the new Wind Mage that was introduced in JP as well. Very interesting character, quite frankly. Not even from her in-game experience, but lore-wise, she's a very cool addition to the game this late in the storyline. And then, for those of you in chat right now, get some questions ready. We will attempt to do some live Q&A at the end, so obviously pepper questions as you want throughout the thing, but if there's any that are really off topic or can't get to, we'll try to save a few minutes at the end here to get through everything. So that's all we got going. I know a lot to potentially go over, but Lucille is dropping tonight, so I'll let you kick things off here. Any initial impressions here? What things do you look for as a support in the game? The first one, really, since Shell's her sister way back when, in all honesty.
So I mean, at this point, it's going to take some considerable capabilities to sort of break into the meta because all of the units just are carrying so much utility baked within their kits already. And in these sort of next gen units, they have those, everybody has that signature skill that has like 4 or 5 different abilities and different buffs and whatnot. So obviously, this is our first lightning unit of the next generation. Interesting that it is a support unit. So the nice thing about a support unit is that they don't really require a lot of vision card support necessarily. We've seen that in the past, even with units like Shawls, where they carry even physical based cards. You don't really need to pump up the magic too much. And this unit actually is kind of in that Shawls vein where she is very much buff centric. She does have healing capability, actually pretty significant healing capability, much more than Shawls. But I would say that she is more of a buffer supporter than a healer and like a traditional white mage. But she is kind of here to kind of true to the lightning element to try and turn the tables a bit onto June, as she does have some significant water resist that she can put onto the team. She does have a re-raise and a re-raise seal on the limit burst as well, which is very, very nice. And that goes to both her and a teammate. So I think those are, a couple of the keys there. Um, I think that she's pretty strong. But my initial take is that thank goodness that we have this sort of 1 month of foresight still, because you know it's sort of looking more like a skip at this point, especially because she is a permanent pool unit, and we know that Final Fantasy VIII is coming. We know that some other significant units like Shurrek, like a lot of people have been calling her, as well. So I don't know. What are your first impressions?
First impressions for me is that they nailed it as a support. There's a lot in their kit, and honestly, we'll probably go through it more. We have this infographic here. We'll go through it more when we do the Fina comparison, but you nailed the first thing that sticks out, which is the re-raise seal to herself and ally. It's also a 25% physical damage reduction to her and that teammate as well, which, as we've seen with units like Cloud, is immense for survivability. It's obviously going to get dispelled at some point, but it's not introduced into the game yet, so we do have a month and a half cushion or so, provided the new summer unit doesn't come in and ruin that, till this really has any kind of downside. So the limit break is exceptional. But even throughout the kit, just to kind of focus on some of those buffs you'd mentioned, her main buff here is the select two on the teammate. It occurs after the limit break, but it's a 50% general barrier for herself. But for the two teammates she picks, it's haste for both. It's also dispel courage for both. It's that water res of 30% that you mentioned for both. And it gives for both a heal back, so very similar to Addison Ray, in that what you give to your teammate a 40% just HP for free when you fall below a certain threshold. And so, those two things in conjunction with each other to start off the fight, really powerful to make sure you get the turn order. Obviously, a bunch of survivability baked in there, but even the curative potential. I know we kind of just like poo pooed her that, it's not necessarily her mainstay, but she does have a rather generous enough AoE here to use at a 210 mod. It does give the chain res and elemental chain res. It gives both kinds for allies, and we'll circle back on this because her vision card is also really important to consider with the chain resistance, where we don't normally focus on that because it's not normally the greatest, but the fact that regular chain resistance is in here is noteworthy with the amount of slash units are in the game and the slash chains that do accumulate. You have the AP restore angle as well for that free 10 AP, which Veritas of the Wind TMR is obviously prevalent. This is certainly a nice buffer for that, and so I think she nails everything in terms of what two units would need for a support. I know one of the more popular teams is running like Sephiroth and Gilgamesh and Lucielle and just letting her pocket them. And they're tanky enough on their own. They do enough damage on their own that you give them some of these things, it really does just allow them to kind of carry. And I'm sure that's the same for many units. And to your point, she can easily be a rainbow unit, particularly as Staff Devout, which does have some really good cards that doesn't take a lot of card support. And there's so many good characters that stand on their own. She really just goes in there and gives everyone a little bit of a bump as that kind of support carry. So I like it a lot. Yeah.
I 100% agree. I do like it a lot. The only reason I'm downplaying it is because I feel like support is a nice to have. It's not necessarily like a need to have. It does completely enable like a totally different play style than we've seen, and basically since Shawls was used as an S tier character in the meta, as rated by us and many others for
Yeah.
quite some time. She has fallen off just because of the rise in dispel. So that is certainly a concern for this unit as well. There is a lot of effects here that are dispellable. However, there are quite a few of them that are not dispellable, like that physical damage reduction you mentioned, like the heal back, like the
Um,
removal of courage that she can bestow onto the units as well. And you mentioned a couple of great candidates that you can pair her with. She pairs pretty much with any unit that's come out here in the of the next generation, to be honest with you. That's kind of the power of not only a support unit but the devout class in general. It does mix well with katana, with red mage, with greatsword, with a couple of others. So another unit that really comes to mind for me is Cloud, where kind of baked into his kit, he doesn't honestly have a ton of utility. He's just kind of like a cannon. He just goes out there and does a ton of damage, and he's hard to kill. But this unit kind of takes him to the next level, I would say. Gives him that courage removal baked in, gives him a heal back, so suddenly he's
yes.
like 10 times tankier.
Yep.
Can give him that haste as well. So I really like that combination on top of the other ones you mentioned.
Absolutely agreed. Right, and even the haste. One of the most common cloud builds we see is using a haste TMR on turn two. This would alleviate Cloud needing to use a TMR for that haste potential. And with Gilgamesh suddenly in the game, that magic barrier looks a lot better. That if you want your Cloud to suddenly start using that instead, and you can get the haste this way, certainly is very viable. I did want to mention a little bit about her offensive capabilities because that's something that Fina does is too, is that offensive angle occasionally. Less so from the supports because obviously they have a heal first mentality, but it's noteworthy to know what they will do should given the opportunity. And I actually think this is a pretty good one. It's a height 2 single target ability, but it's a guaranteed hit, and it's a piercing ability, which means she will use it to potentially hit two people if it goes right through them. I really do like the disable chance here for no other reason than no one's really gearing against it right now. Out of all the stat effects that are in the game, this is not one of the more dangerous ones, and there are enough 97 Faith units running around that if you land this on a Sephiroth or a Gilgamesh, it's pretty debilitating. It's not going to be terribly often, but all it needs to happen is once, and that's the fight, if you know what I mean. So I do
Yeah.
like what they attempted to do here, where supports are typically very inaccurate, and this kind of really doesn't matter. I think back to, was it Renoa with the guaranteed hits that, really allowed her to just kind of like go out there and do whatever you want, and you don't have to worry about any accuracy issues, anything like that. I like what they did with her offensive side here potentially.
I agree because she is inaccurate, at least compared to the next generation, she is the worst of the bunch thus far. I did wanted to point out Chris Metz in the chat says that if she's anti-Jum, wouldn't Resnick be 80 to 90% of Lucille?
Not even close.
No, not even close. I would say that she's be lucky if she's half of Lucille. Resnick at this point just she gets two taps or even one taps. Especially if Mont is out there. Lucille is tanky enough that she can even take a hit from King Mont.
Oh yeah.
That's she's incredibly anti-physical. She's got the barrier. She's got wide res. She's got some physical, flat physical reduction. She's got some, AOE and unit res. She's significantly tanky against physical damage in particular.
Yep. So it got that crit evade built in too, so even King Mont's follow-up attacks aren't going to ding her as often. Yeah, no, she's a massive upgrade over Resnick, who is really just a heal bot with really nothing else. And even that heal, her magic stat isn't high enough, in my opinion, to really replenish some of the health pools that you're seeing now.
We tried like we were trying like when June closer to when she first dropped, we were trying lightning teams with Resnick, and you could kind of get there, and then maybe in lower tiers where June isn't as buffed out with scrolls and things, maybe it works a little bit better. Unfortunately, like for against any sort of reincarnated units, they're just doing way too much damage against her.
Yep. And even the non-reincarnated units, I still had a tough time fitting her in. There's so many X factors to her taking damage. It just doesn't end well. The power creep. It's a power creep. You got to leave it at that.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll just look at a couple other angles here. I do like this weapon quite a bit for her. This is the hate -5 as well. This is particularly important for some of those select two abilities where the AI has the capability to bypass some of those tank options to like tank hate, And so that hate -5 means she won't be selected first if given the opportunity of other units. It's the 8% flat physical damage reduction as well. The magic of 25% is nice, but I really do like what this weapon does for her to kind of aid how often she's targeted and the damage she does end up taking.
Yeah, she's going to be perpetually at the bottom of the hate list because of this weapon. And then, even if that kind of neutralizes, if she does some healing, her reaction ability does kind of drop her down there as well. So she's probably going to be the last one to die in almost every fight, which is what you want from a support unit.
Yeah.
They can get in there, do some healing, maybe some clutch, attacks at the end of the fight, like with that guaranteed hit that you highlighted. So
Yeah.
it's a quality unit. It's a very good unit. My perspective is just kind of because we know what's coming and we know summer is coming as well. On top of that, there's going to be a simultaneous drop with JP, which if you kind of look back on the past year, those simultaneous drops with JP have been the most significant meta movers of anything that we've seen in the
Yes.
meta. You look back at June, you look back at Lucio, look back at,
Summer Glaciella.
Helena, Glaciella was there as well.
Yep.
So those 4 units have transformed our meta overnight because essentially we're getting a unit from the future here, 1 month, but typically they are countering something that we are seeing as a problem. So
Yeah. Excellent perspective, and I completely agree. Right, any recommendation we have to pass on her is not an indication of her skill. It's really just an economics discussion where everyone's pretty much spent from Advent Children. That Final Fantasy VIII collaboration is worth pulling on. Cypher is an exceptional unit, and obviously is more in the future as well. And then you always got to consider the Hollow Vision card expense too, and it just comes down to economics. But she absolutely is worth 2 thumbs. I think she's better than Fina personally, but we are going to debate that soon. I do think she's an excellent unit that has some significant lasting power, and we've seen a lot of these supports. They do tend to have some lasting power because they can be put in a variety of metas typically, and they don't get as power creep from like a damage perspective, where I think the DPS are a little more like up and down in terms of how the game ebbs and flows, and we've seen some supports come back into the fray at weird times.
yeah, I mean, if you going back to the Resnick question, I mean, she lasted for forever in the meta. She lasted for a good year and a half. Same thing with Velis,
Yeah.
who came out even before Resnick, or I believe, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have that flexibility that, like we said, their little card support is needed. Pretty much an agility card is all you need, and sometimes not even that if they're innately fast, which this unit is, because her main passive is an agility passive.
Yes.
So she gets that. She doesn't need to. Some units you kind of have to pick and choose if you want that agility. Not with this unit. It's kind of her best passive there. So
No. And if I could just emphasize one last thing, because I do want to keep moving for her vision card, I really do think this is an exceptional rainbow unit where there's so many units in the game that this limit break will transform that unit that don't have re-raise or courage. I know like Shurrek that we're going to talk about soon doesn't have either. Giving her re-raise and re-raise seal is immense. Some of these characters like Oberyn the Auspicious, who does not have the re-raise or courage, giving someone like him this is immense. There's so many characters with when you give them this heal back as well. It's kind of like Addison, right? It doesn't matter who you put her with. The value of that heal back and the re-raise and the re-raise seal, and even this buff here with the haste and dispel courage, that's literally good on anybody in the game. There's not a single unit that's not good on. And so this to me like is a really strong rainbow support where some other supports maybe not as strong of a case.
100% agreed. I think, yeah, she can fit into really any team out there.
Definitely. And just to kind of piggyback here, her vision card that's coming out, it's actually an interesting one to talk through. And so the vision card here is for Sword Red Mage, Sword Knight, and Staff Devout. And there's not a lot of overlap. There's actually no overlap with Staff Devout and Sword Knight. So this is the first card to really kind of open that door. It's 36% chain resistance, which for the slash chains, obviously very good. And when you combine that with her own innate, 40% chain res, you'd be surprised that that is getting to levels that it does start to actually make a damage difference for you. And then in addition to that, it's 16% physical AoE wide resistance and 25% debuff weakening. And for Guild War, which we all like to focus on here, 12% slash resistance, which does get easily penetrated, but that's for free, 12%. And so I'll pause there. I'll let you give some quick hit thoughts because I know you've looked at this card for a couple of weeks now. What do you think about the Vision card?
It's a main slot contender potentially.
Yes.
I think that I see this as a very strong anti-greatsword card
Yep.
because the greatsword team they're living and dying by those large diamonds. Even Cloud has kind of a large AoE also. So this gets you the chain resist to kind of, like you said, stack against the chaining that they do. Cloud's got his 3-hitter, and then Joom comes and follows up and is able to do big damage, kind of getting that 4th hit in the chain. So kind of eliminating 50% plus of that, with between her buffs and heals and the card is very, very strong. You do get the slash resistance in there as a bonus for Guild Wars in particular. So it's a solid card. If you are going for the unit, I'd want to grab this to kind of mix with some of those teams like a Gilgamesh. So
Yep.
if you are skipping out on this unit, probably don't need it. But maybe maybe you could use it on Gilgamesh though, to be honest, and kind of build into that Knight and Red Mage overlap because they do share a couple of cards there.
Definitely, definitely. And just real quickly to answer Shogun RC's question, does her heal back buff stack if a unit already has one? The answer is yes, although I think it depends on the heal back percentage. But I think almost all instances it does stack with units that have heal back. So yes, it will proc 2 different heal backs. It's incredibly good.
I think it will stack if they're of a different value.
Right, right. There has to be some number difference, and most units is different. But yeah, but just to recap on this card, one of the things that I'm trying to change the way I look at some of these things is this 16% physical wide res, where we've talked about this being the new AoE res, and I think this is why this is a main slot vision card. And the general idea is that if you look at a normal vision card that has 20 AoE res on it, well, we're at the point where an average penetration from units like Cloud or Sephiroth, you're talking, let's say, 40 penetration for AoE resistance, not including the crushes of AoE crushes, that if you're penetrating 20%, you're essentially bringing them down to 12 AoE res, right? And so you compare, well, what's better, 12 AoE res or this 16% physical wide res? And this is technically better, and it's non-dispellable, and it does also affect a little bit differently the smaller AoEs because you have your diamonds, you have your squares, and both of those take different amounts, but this is at least comparable. That's the bottom line. It's not exactly the same as the 20 AoE res, but in practice, it's a lot closer than we give it credit for. And so sure, if there's some magic units in there, yes, you're going to go in there with not the same AoE res against an AoE magic unit, but that's really not the case at the moment. Other than Gilgamesh. So let me walk that back. There is a fair amount of magic AoE with Gilgamesh alone, but with the debuff weakening you add into that, where you talk about like imperils and AoE crushes and things of that nature, that if you can reduce the crush percentage or the imperil percentage, it might as well be AoE res. It might, because it's still a form of damage mitigation at the end of the day. And so I think the conjunction of those, not even talking about the chain res, which we talked up a second ago, all of those things are roughly equivalent to what you might get with a normal 20 AoE res card, for instance. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, the debuff weakening, like you were saying, does fit into that picture as well, specifically against the crushes that, you're taking with this card alone, you're taking a 60% down to a 45% crush, which, yeah, that's now you're, starting to dig into some of that damage potential of the other team. It does really set up the Red Mage group in general as one of the best at, doing debuff weakening too.
Yeah.
They now have like, I want to say at least 3 cards now, including this one that can do debuff weakening. So, like I said, I think it is also a pretty nice card for Gilgamesh if you've invested into him.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot of good units on here, obviously, but Gilgamesh does stand out as a very topical unit, and it's part of the reason why we talked about what team synergizes well. Like Gilgamesh and Lucille together make a lot of sense, and this card's one of the reasons.
Definitely.
Yeah, but we'll move on to the next portion of this, which is kind of a debate here, looking at Fina versus Lucille, and there's pros and cons to both. They're both very different, to be honest. Obviously, Fina, we'll give a little recap of Fina. She's a magic scaling bow unit, so similar to Rosa, similar to like Jaden in terms of like magic scaling missile attacks. She is of the light element as well, so that is kind of the conversation when you talk about various element synergies. But they have two different vision card job classes, and I'll be honest, they do two entirely different things too in terms of support and survivability. Um, I don't know how we want to approach this. Do we want to recap Fina a little bit first, just so we kind of know apples and oranges or how to talk? Yeah.
Yeah, so just for folks in the chat, just to recap, this is a little bit forward looking. You know, Fina just came out in JP, I want to say like 2 weeks ago. She comes out. So basically, we're going to get Lucille, you know, whenever the next update is. Then, like the following week, we should be going into Final Fantasy VIII with Seifer and his vision card.
Yep.
And then we're looking at Fina the week after Seifer's vision card comes in. Unless they do change up something with the summer units, potentially. That is a potential wrinkle in there. So we did think it would be like a good kind of comparison here, because I'm sure some people out there probably not going to pull for two, maybe not even pull for one. But at a minimum, you might be kind of weighing your options here between, you know, two comparable support role, you know, units. So Fina, we talked about her a little bit last week. She's the bow unit. She's kind of the next kind of building block for that particular group. So, you know, she does have that kind of angle. But she, in my opinion, is more, whereas Lucille is more buff centric, I think Fina is more white mage, like traditional white mage, where she's doing healing, she's doing status ailment dispels,
Yep.
and she's doing like kind of protect and shell kind of capability as well. So that's how I would kind of compare them in a nutshell.
It's a great way to put it, right? Because if I'll skip ahead to their support section here. The thing with Fina, her limit break technically is a much stronger curative potential at the 310 modifier. It also dispels curse, so totally different strategic reason why you might bring her in. It also still applies that 25% damage reduction, which Lucille gives on her limit break, so they are comparable in that regard. Her normal heal, though, does apply the Protect and Shell, as you mentioned, which, while easily dispellable, mid fight, it's a little more dicey whether or not they're dispellable. In terms of Protect, one of the things I like about it is that you might change the enemy AI. They might prioritize abilities they don't normally because they have to constantly just re-dispel that Protect. I actually like the Shell on her too for someone like Cloud who can seal shell removal on hit. So if you give someone Shell mid-fight, Cloud will likely have already sealed the enemy capability to dispel that shell. So you are talking about a mid-fight 25% magic damage reduction from the shell capability alone. And yeah, I can't underrate enough her. Let me see if I can bring it up here. Her lowest AP or lowest TP heal ability does have the ailment curative potential, which I think is very nice. That it's still a really strong modifier, 210 mod, and it's not all effects, but poison, frostbite, blind, silence, paralyze, confuse, and berserk. That's the majority of what you're going to get randomly. So that's certainly a much nice different kind of healing capability, and she's full life capable, which Lucille has none of. So that's a obviously great game changer to bring a unit back to full. It does not work if the enemy dies with curse, and so there I think that's one of the weaknesses here. There is a timing element to whether or not you actually dispel the curse when it's applied. It's totally possible that she uses this limit break early. Seth hasn't used limit break yet. He uses it after, and now he just kind of shit out of luck. Totally possible, but way different support capability. So I'll pause there because obviously there's other things to consider.
I think that you nailed a lot of it. One thing that I will say though is, at least in the replays that I've seen so far, Fina is a bit more involved offensively, at least early in
Yes.
the fight.
Yep.
And that's purely just because of her significant range advantage over Lucille, where Fina, you know, with her range extension passive, she's looking at like 8 range plus potentially if she has a buff. So that skill, that I mean, she only has I think one attack skill, but it's an incredible skill, because not only do you get the CT down where, you know, maybe you can combo that with a keen blade and now you're double turning the other team, but it does have the seal enemy debuffs, which is
Yes.
incredible capability. You know, and she has the potential to hit multiple units. It's a big diamond attack. So think about just nailing all three other units. They can't debuff you anymore. Pretty huge capability. Obviously, we've seen that on other units like Lynx, Lynx the Shadowborn, but unfortunately, it just hasn't come to fruition just because you're relying so much on the damage there from that unit, and it's not super competitive. But I have some hopes that Fina can put that to pretty good use.
I agree. And just to recap the importance of the ceiling enemy debuff, I mean, not everyone knows what the umbrella of debuffs is, but that's healing power down. That's these AoE crushes. That's these imperils. They can do none of it. So forget debuff weakening. They literally can't do any of the debuffs. It's an enormous capability to protect your team on any kind of debilitating status effects they might encounter. And so, it's kind of a double edged sword. I've seen some fights where she attacks a little bit earlier than you would have liked, or maybe moves forward just a smidge earlier than you would want. But there's no doubt this is a high impact ability that not only has some great utility with the CT down, but doubles with the debuff seal for her how much she'll have to do in the future to kind of heal her teammates up. So really good call out there.
At least early on, at least from what we can gather from JP, Lucielle seems to have the early edge in terms of like actual meta impact. I kind of take it a little bit with a grain of salt though at the same time, because Fina is like coming in where the JP player base is absolutely tapped, much like we are. Like they're coming off two big collabs where they just had Seifer come in as well, and he was kind of looked like a meta changing unit, and he has been. So the timing element for her, there was a lot of units that came out this month, so I'm not quite sure how many guilds were actually able to pull her en masse. But I think that Lucielle does have the edge in terms of like really team enabling, and she works well with the new wind unit that just came out, like you mentioned.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, we'll have to, the summer unit, depending on what it is, could completely flip that, and maybe Fina is better with the summer unit. It's kind of hard to say at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to circle back here too on the survivability component because Fina's unique in that she does have a two-time, we call it a mirage barrier. What that basically means is that you take literally no damage. I don't care who it's from or what the amount is. You literally take no damage twice. Now, that does count as a barrier, so it can be broken, but different kind of damage mitigation. She brings some spirit as well for herself and teammate, which does obviously help a little bit of the Gilgamesh uptick, the debuff weakening, the re-raise. The honeycomb barrier is obviously really important for a missile unit who tends to stay further back away, and hers is at a slightly weaker percentage. It's about 7%. Normally, I think it's 10% that you get for honeycomb. So the way that works again is that for between ranges 4 and 7 away from the enemy attacking you, you get 7% damage reduction the further you are away for each tile. So if enemy 4 squares away, you'll take 7% less damage. If they're 5 squares away, it's 14% damage reduced. If it, same escalating. So I don't think she has as much in the kit to mitigate what Lucille does, but that's also because I think Fina's gonna be further away, and so I don't think she needs the same tankiness tools that Lucille does. Where Lucille's going to be giving herself the damage reduction down. I know Crimson Lice had mentioned that Lucille's kind of weak to magic, but her barrier is a general type barrier, so it does apply to magic as well, technically. So it's two different types, but I think Fina's got the space advantage that she probably won't be in the way of damage as often as Lucille will.
And like we said, with pretty much every bow unit that's come along, there is kind of the copium for the future that it could still be a job that could see significant development with some of the units that have been teased. Um, I want to point out Chris Metz in the chat. He says that everyone has the greatsword VCs, whereas bow doesn't have enough card crossover. The card crossover has been developing pretty significantly the last few months, but it is still in need of further development. I absolutely agree with that. But what we said earlier about Lucille 100% applies to Fina as well,
Right.
where you really only need an agility card on a dedicated support unit. You just need them to keep up with the turn order, and really that's about it, because they do have that spacing advantage, like you said, that oftentimes they're going to be further back and not taking as much damage. And Fina, she's going to have enough HP and general bulk, even if the Mirage does get broken, she's going to be able to take a hit, and her casting time is very, very strong, where she's going to be able to get the heal off, even if she's already used her LB.
Totally. No, I completely agree. Not only on the vision card part that you don't need as many cards for these units, but to be honest, she's got a couple good ones here too. I mean, I noticeably think of Chariot, which is the magic percent and the agility percent as well. You talk about 2-in-1. That's absolutely right up her alley for what she wants. But they do have enough between like some of the other unit scaling cards, like the unit res cards. Her own one is the HP percent and agility, so you have that free agility card theoretically for her, and the what is it, glove and great sword. So like there's enough here that I think you can still get away with it. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean the latest cards there, Chariot and then her own card, are both going to give that 18% agility. That's really, like I said, that's all that she needs.
Yeah,
And Chariot especially gives the 50% magic, so she's eating good with that one.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So it remains to be seen. It's still a little early again. Fina does not seem to have been adopted in JP really at all, and even the team she is in, it's really one note. It's basically her and Cloud and Cipher. The rest of the teams really have not performed well. So I do agree that they're pretty tapped on terms of Viz. So that's probably a very big consideration for why some might have passed on Fina. But we do know that there's some guilds that are like mono light only in JP, and they didn't even pull her. And even like numbers wise, even though it might be a smaller sample size, I haven't been wowed by the variations of teams and like the average stars on those teams. So even to the point that maybe not everyone pulls them, the ones that have, the results aren't like groundbreaking. So that could just be timing too. Obviously, we know there's a lot of factors. Maybe it's just not a good map for her. Like, could be that simple too. So it's too early to make conclusions.
Yeah.
But we'll keep going along here. We want to bring up Guild War Supremacy that just ended and talk a little bit about the results and your experiences and ours, and shout out some guilds that did well. And we will cover the new Guild War map. But Howl, that we're both a part of, was fortunate enough to be in the G1 League, and we were able to go toe to toe with some of these guys. We did get a win over Asura, who came in first here. We like to brag. We're the guild that has made them given them their last two losses. No one's beat them except for us. And it's been two straight times. It's been us that has taken them down. We only lost a final boss that very first day. They had a very good wall that, it was the first day of Supremacy. We didn't really know what to expect. And we unfortunately lost by, 15 points here to second place. And a little bit more than 100 to Asura. But very competitive. I'll pause there to give your Howl experience, though. How was it for you?
It was great. I mean, for all the reasons that you mentioned, and just the collaboration with the guilds was frenzied and fun and overwhelming. But thankfully, all of our schedule was front loaded. Like, we faced the top three guilds in basically the first 3 or 4 days.
Yep.
And then we were able to kind of take the foot off the gas a little bit after that. But 100%, hats off to Asura, who won the league, and final boss as well, who was right there. Grats to Chocoboss and to the rest of the G1 league just for making it into G1. It's an accomplishment on its own. That means that you've been able to win the limited guild wars that led up to this. So unfortunately, like you said, it just came down to tiebreakers. Ashura, in their loss, they were able to clear the board. Final boss, I think, got 84, 85 or something like that.
Right.
And then we put up 83 in our loss. So that ended up being the difference. Just came down to points, despite us actually beating the winner here. So yeah, it was a great experience. I always enjoy Supremacy. My personal philosophy when it comes to this is that there's Vizier on the line, so I'm willing to go a little bit extra in those moments and and earn that Vizier for the guild, and that's what we were able to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This one for me, it's one of those pride moments where, Chocoboss, Asura, and Final Boss are the top three guilds because every single day they put in the work to coordinate 30 people to min max everything and stress test everything, and the consistency day in day out is unparalleled. It's what you have to do to maintain at the top of the game. But in a Supremacy like this, where you know your schedule ahead of time, there's no wall games in terms of like surprising people as much because you know who your opponent is, and because it's more of a condensed schedule. I like this as an opportunity to kind of maybe put your best foot forward that you can't do on the other 360 days of the year. That you can kind of like go hard for 1 week, really show everybody what you got. So it's a good pride moment for those competing.
100%. Yeah.
But we did want to give shout outs to the other leagues. We're not the only league. There's other ones here, and Mako and Steel Wings are two of the regular top 10 guilds here. And Mako came out at 9-0. Obviously, very strong performance given the rest of the guilds here. And even I know like Silver is a fringe top 10 guild. I don't think they've made it officially, but they keep fluctuating, and Phoenix Down is right there too. So this is still a very competitive bracket. Up and down, and Mako, hats off. That's a very competitive guild.
Yeah. Congrats to Mako. We know a lot of those guys. Crimson, he's in the chat here. He's a
Yep,
big part of that guild. So definitely kudos to those guys.
absolutely. Yeah, they give us trouble quite frequently when we guild war. Like that's a very solid guild, and yeah, to the rest of them. But the other leagues here, the Guild League 2, these are teams that a little bit more down the ladder that we're used to seeing. I know Baphomet and Sriwijaya are more like in the 20-ish range, and
Yeah.
Aurora used to be very high, but they have fallen as of late down a little bit. But congrats to Baphomet, who also undefeated here, 9-0. Obviously, a very good accomplishment. Congrats to them.
Definitely. Yeah. We definitely have seen some of these guys maybe a little bit before we went into the top 10, but yeah, Baphomet, I know that they're big a PvE guild as well. You always see them on the leaderboard, so definitely a strong guild there.
Right on. And then we have two more to look at. It's the third league, which is Salt City. And Seventh Heaven and Balam Garden are technically other top 10 contenders quite frequently. But Salt City 8-0 here, and Seventh Heaven 8-0. So I'm assuming they tied each other. And if that's the case, then Salt City won on points based upon how they cleared the other guilds, I would imagine. Obviously, that seems to be the tiebreaker. But very interesting result here.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the backstory on how that went down because it has to be like there must have been some, maybe they didn't clear one other guild or something like that, but definitely looks like that was a dogfight there.
Definitely. Unless maybe they tied other guilds, but that would seem odd to me that rank 1 and 2 would tie guilds that are not in the top 4. That seems irregular. So it had to be each
Yeah,
other.
yeah, definitely.
The last one here, though, is the Guild League 4. And Takeover, actually not a guild I'm familiar with. I don't know if they've recently changed their name, but 9-0 and Gilgiflair, Parandon, who I also know are contenders around the top 15, top 20 area. But congrats to all these guilds, too.
Yeah, Takeover, I think they're I want to say like mid 20s, maybe 30. But I think at least one friend in that guild, Chase Versal. Shout out to him if he's watching. And congrats on taking G League 4.
Right on. So Supremacy, great experience. I'm glad it's over. It's in spurts. It doesn't need to be forever. But we're getting back to regular Guild War, and we will be getting a new map relatively soon, whenever that reset occurs, which could be next week, quite frankly. But I've not.
Yeah,
Got,
just
go ahead.
just real quick before we hop into that. So just to clarify on that point, we are getting 9 days of login bonuses this week, which is super irregular. A lot of times when we have these longer weeks, we get like just the normal 7 days. So for some reason, they decided to go the extra 2 days this week. That's going to take us all the way through the 4th of July. And then we're going to have the weekend, which we don't get updates on the weekend. So we're probably looking at our next update on the 8th at the earliest at this
Yeah.
point. So this is what the next map that we should be getting. Sorry.
No.
Just
That's
wanted to clarify.
it's a good call out because we mentioned that in the start, but I should clarify it again now for expectation's sake. This is a new one that we have not played with, at least in Guild Wars so far. There's a couple of things we always look for me. The first thing is how are all the units spaced out? Are they 3 squares or 4 squares away? That always determines how far you can buff. The second thing is what's the height variation here? Because if you have a height of 2, obviously that changes a lot of buff options too for units that don't have that jump capability to cross over that threshold. Or if there's an intraversable area where you can't cross no matter what. Obviously something to look at too. There's a couple other things here. I think that there's a couple squares here that because they're non-traversable, it does mitigate the bait potential of going straight ahead and hitting the enemy makes it less likely where units can't walk three straight squares ahead directly at each other. And this map, it's not long, it's not short. 13 squares is shorter, but not the shortest. But 13's not long. I wouldn't call this a long map. And
No.
that's really it. I don't really think there's a lot of high ground to necessarily abuse. There is some of this, height 3 area, but I don't really foresee anybody really getting up here unless you're using a missile unit, and that's as niche as it gets. Everyone else, I would imagine, is likely to hang out in this 1 to 2 square area, where particularly with a lot of these meta units, they're limited to height 1 abilities. Not every unit gets height 2 flexibility, so it's still going to be a slugfest in the middle. But this is a pretty hard choke point in my opinion, where in order to cross over the center of the map, you're looking at this like these three tiles right here with these two non-traversable areas kind of putting them together. And even this bottom area, a little bit dicey because it's, again, you kind of get into that territory of like, who are you targeting? But down here, not even a lot of height variations. It's just this one random height 3, which not the end of the world. But that's what I look for. That's my thoughts. I'll pause.
Yeah, this map is kind of interesting because it is very straightforward if you just eliminated the non-traversable areas. And that is kind of what's creating those funnels and choke points that you mentioned. We don't normally see this many blacked out squares, kind of thinking back on the last bunch of maps that we've had. So those definitely alter the pathing and kind of the trajectory that your units take. So yeah, there could be some kind of funny moments, I think, with kind of the paths that the units take once we get our hands on this one.
Definitely, but I don't see anything wrong with it right now. With if anything, I think it's a good thing for the follow up attacks and the auras. Some of these maps, as of late, with the height 2 variations, I have noticed some more inconsistency with units using the follow up attacks, or someone like Summer Glaciella using her aura effect, which both of those are limited to height 1. And so now that you're kind of eliminating some of that risk here, I think some of these fights will be a little bit more straightforward.
Definitely, I think it's I mean shaping up to be a pretty good map for Gilgamesh for sure,
Definitely, and then
and the greatsword units too.
the great sword's absolutely viable here. I mean, again, there's nothing starting position wise which would prevent them from doing that, and even the bait potential. I think great sword. Cloud's really the only one, in my opinion, that has a ton of bait potential. A2 a little bit, but A2 is also kind of fading by the wayside just a little bit here. So maybe not as big of a consideration.
Yeah, with Cloud, it's kind of usually reliant on whether you have his additional movement enabled, which a lot of us do because it's tied to his agility. But you can take him down to move 3 if you feel like you're getting baited too much.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm sure we'll see some Keenblade stuff scattered in there per usual too. But we'll keep moving along here because we're at 47 minutes. There's a couple other topics we want to cover in depth, and one of them is the Reincarnation Festival. This is coming back, and we do have a link. We'll post it after this recording for you to go and vote on your units. I don't remember voting last year personally. I thought it was just JP that voted. Maybe they've changed that, but we had some really great candidates last year that got the votes. I was personally very happy with all of them. The exception being Vega and Alaya. Alaya, because missile units are typically poor reincarnation targets, they just don't get the same value, so I thought that was a little bit of a waste. And then Vega, I kind of just thought was a waste because I didn't think people were using him. And I thought there were just better lightning units to vote on. Skahal came to mind, and Renan came to mind, and shoot, even regular Resnick to support. Like, there's a bunch of lightning units I thought were more deserving, but a pause. We do have a little fun, I don't know, exercise to go through here that, new Reincarnation Fest targets, and it is cut off at Ashen King Mont. It's no units released after him, so that's a hard cutoff. And the way you set this up is that each element, this is the most recently released unit. You've excluded MR units. We've obviously excluded limited units because limited technically. Did you put some X's on here already?
I did. I put the X's on the winners from last year.
Got it.
Because I just figured we don't need to see them again.
I got you.
We had our chance last time.
Jumping the gun, I like it. But I think that's the general layout of this. These are in order 1 to 5, the most recent to least recent of the element units. So I think the idea here, we were going to go through and put pluses on the units that we liked as candidates and X's on the ones that we thought don't vote. Um, so
Yeah.
I like the way you started this off. You've gotten the previous winners here. I would agree with this. I don't think any of these units are necessarily worthy. You could make the case for Raph, people that might have missed it a year ago. She's got some really
Yeah.
good upgrades. That's the only one that I think is debatable.
Actually, looking at it now and looking at the other choices available for dark, for the general populace, maybe I would still go for. We should at least take the X off of her. I think that she's still viable.
I'd agree with that.
But let's start off with ice and let's just go down the line.
Yeah, I mean, Aldoa is a definite yes for me. There's not even a debate on that. Excellent tank. Still very
Yep.
competitive. You don't see her very often, but she's still an excellent tank.
And like you said, I've basically ordered this from order of release. All of the newest units here are at the top, and these are just basically the last 5 non-limited, non-free or non-MR units. Aside from that, I think that's probably the best candidate for ice, to be honest, because the other thing to think about is, even if you don't have these units, we saw last year that we did get a pretty decent banner that came along with, once they did release the Reincarnation Fest. And that was a place where people were able to pick up Raph or pick up Dialdo. If I remember correctly, the banner actually wasn't too bad. So there might have even been like a select banner for paid viz too, something like that. To be honest, I think that's probably the only one I would vote for out of ice. Maybe you could make an argument for either Jaden or Howlett. I wouldn't vote for any of the others at this point, to be honest.
I'm going to completely agree. Grifford, although I actually have him max reincarnated, can't do anything with him. Reagan, I don't think this elevates him at all. There's way too many deficiencies. Howlett, very borderline, but just on the basis of kind of like do we want to steer the votes? I'm going to say no. There's just his upgrades have been so bad that a reincarnation won't save him. I do want to put a plus on Jaden the Celebrated, though, where he's getting some new tech. He's getting the AoE res pen on his MA ability. I do think he's the kind of unit that has enough effective HP that if you give him the HP stat, if you give him the extra AP from a reincarnation, some of those stats that he desperately needs, even the magic stat, I think he is a unit that can really get better with it. So I don't want to put a X, but not nearly as strong as Oldoa.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
You want to kick us off for fire here? What do you think for units?
So fire, actually last year, both Hio and Ildira were both eligible last year, and actually King Mont ended up taking it down for fire, which I didn't mind actually. Like he was very viable at the time as kind of the front runner of that fire evasion team for a long time. At this point, I think that I could only honestly recommend either Volk or Soul. Volk, obviously, as he hasn't really shown all that much, but he's still a decent like cost 70 tank. Like for his cost, I think that's where he gains a little bit of bonus points. And he is actually pretty good against Gilgamesh, to be honest. He can do some good damage against Gilgamesh.
Totally agreed. We've all said Volk is like borderline really great. And as a 70 cost unit, these stats do make him a very good unit.
Yeah. And Soul, actually, it's the same kind of argument. He's very good against Gilgamesh, and that's kind of where he lives at the moment. There is kind of some, potential that you could mix him with Lucielle as well, kind of as a part of that devout synergy. The other units, Hio, I can't recommend him. Ildira, her kind of window is over. Shawls, she doesn't need reincarnation. She worked fine without it.
Yep.
So the first two, I think, and probably Soul is probably the best out of the bunch, I would say.
Completely agreed. Which then brings us to water, and I think we are going to put a plus here for June. There's no doubt this girl is better max reincarnated. I would tend to argue I think a lot of the player base likely has already reincarnated her. The top end of the game most definitely has, so this is kind of a waste for the top end. But even casual players, if you haven't yet and you still want to use her, valid winner. I absolutely think she is. The rest of them, can I wait? Let me do this. I'm immediately putting X's on Gernsback and Amnelis. There's no copium there. Shadowlynx is debatable. Missile units tend to not be very good reincarnation units, and I don't think she's any different. So I'm leaning toward no for her.
I agree. I don't think it's gonna, if she gets like 1400 HP out of her, or 1800 HP or something like that, which is one of the problems with missile units that we've talked about. Is she better at reincarnated? Yes. She gets better crit, she gets a little bit more attack and whatnot, but I think like the biggest benefit you get from putting her as a reincarnation fest is that she's on a banner again. I think that's, the biggest benefit there.
It is, but even then, we haven't used her. So even if you can pull her, use it for
Yeah.
what? We can't even use her now. So, but that is a
Yeah.
good upside. Young Eld is very debatable. He's in the jading category for me. We personally know how good this unit is. We also have not seen him the light of day the last 3 months. Now, a lot of that was A2 related. With her going away, though, does this give him other opportunities? Water is obviously very good at the moment. Spears had a huge resurgence vision card wise. He is a permanent pool unit, so you don't have to worry about any of the like Crystal Warrior banners rerun to like get his shards. Me personally, I think Joom is better for most. I want to give him the plus though. I think he's a valid reincarnation target.
I think that there still is like some upside into the Gilgamesh and Sephiroth team for him, because he breaks the barriers. He has the elemental advantage against Sephiroth. Obviously, the curse angle hurts him tremendously
Yep.
again in that matchup, but you can reduce his faith down to 30, and you can put the trust stone on them and at least cut that chance in half. Is he like the best play? No, but I think that he's still usable.
Right. Right. Of the remaining units, it's not
Yeah.
lost. Now for Lightning, this is a very interesting one. Astrius has really fallen off a cliff as of late. Still a quality unit though. I don't know if I would recommend anyone to reincarnate him at this point, though. I don't know if I would say, yeah, like, I see good upside for him if you do this. I think his window's closed personally, but I think he's still a plus.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I'm kind of considering when I look at this list is the not only do we get the banner that comes in for the units, but there is like a bunch of low cost shards that you can pick up. So the other thing is like some people might have these units, they might not be finished. You can now spend like some guild medals and some free match medals and a bunch of those Mog medals to kind of pick up a bunch of shards for these units. Um, a lot of us have already reincarnated Alaya, and that's really the only other viable unit that I see on this list. So I would give those top two the plus, but I would lean towards Astrius personally.
I would too. I will say I already voted. I did give Renan my vote, so do with that what you will. Uh,
Just to answer real quick, Andrew in the chats, this is the Reincarnation Festival. So we're gonna, if you weren't aware of the link, we're gonna post that into the description of the video after it goes live, after we're done. But the object of this is essentially Gumi is going to pull the player base here. The winners are then going to be given some reduced resource cost to reincarnate them. There's going to be a banner if you don't have the units, so you can pull them if you want to, and then some other goodies and stuff in terms of shards that will come in with them. So they did it last year, kind of right after Road to Worldwide, and it was pretty good, I think, in terms of the goodies that we got.
Absolutely. I know I max ranked a lot of those units that I wouldn't have otherwise, like Flagbearer Glaciella, King Mont, the fire unit. I got a lot of mileage out of both of them. I did both the Aldo and Raf, who were great tanks for a long time. This is definitely, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe the unit selection now with the power creep, less of a uh, driver, but still a good thing overall.
There's definitely a few that are still absolutely worthy at this point.
Yeah.
And we're about to talk about one of them.
We are. King Mont, absolutely still worth it. And I think he's the de facto, yes, gets the vote. Again, top end, a lot of players already max reincarnated him, but as the average player, this is a unit where the reincarnations really make him soar. The extra crit rate, the extra attack for the follow up, the extra HP for his heal back capability, all of the reincarnation stats are right up his alley for what he wants to shine. So, 2 thumbs up.
I don't think I could recommend any other unit on this list. Melamia, she's pretty good, but it's like kind of the same argument we had with Lynx. They don't really take too much benefit from the reincarnation, unfortunately.
Yep. Yeah, if this was 4 months ago, I might have voted Melnia because there's a couple fights where she came very close to like doing well. She wasn't. She lived longer than I thought, and maybe 1,500 HP is the difference. Maybe it's not. Maybe the extra tax. Maybe it's not. Not today. 4 months ago, maybe not anymore. So
Yeah,
that gets the X for me. Yeah, King Mon's the de facto for sure.
100% best unit here. I mean, you can make an argument for June, but I think most of us, if you put a gun to our head, we'd probably take Mon first.
Definitely. I do want to kick off when Dario is absolutely a reincarnation candidate, worthy candidate. He's going to come back into the forefront here with Shurrek, who we haven't talked about yet. We have to get there at some point. And still a great general tank, katana oriented unit. Definitely does well with the Ryans.
Yeah, we're finally seeing some glimmer of hope that he could. There's finally a unit, Shrek and JP, that has come out that maybe we could put him to some good use, and that could be benefit alone for voting for him if you weren't able to pick him up before. And honestly, outside of Glaciella, I don't really see any other good candidates here. And Glaciella is a unit that's been in the game at this point for more than 2 years, and I think that her time window is finally over.
I would agree. I don't recommend any other units here. Definitely not. For light, this is a very interesting one. Um, let me preliminarily put an X on Helena. We've been in her meta. The game has changed balance to stop her. Anyone that's already put reincarnations into her, I think you likely already have. I don't think this is a good use of resources in the current day. She gets shut down by nearly everything pretty decisively. So I don't think you're going to get any return if you do that.
I agree. I think we could make that same case though for Soul and for Alaya as well, though, if that's how we were treating it.
Soul's being used right
Um,
now, though.
True, but I mean, Helena could come back around. Um, yeah, that's fine. The other two, absolutely X them out.
Which two?
Miranda and Elena.
It's so funny you say that. Elena, I agree with. I had some toss-up copium for what's her name, Miranda,
Miranda.
as a katana unit.
Really?
I used her a little bit. It wasn't great, but it was early in the katana meta. I don't think she's amazing, but it's the kind of unit that I think the reincarnation stats on a 70 cost unit could help her a little bit. And I say that only from the perspective that I don't want to put it into Helena. And although Lucio is a good candidate, I want to give him the plus, and I think he's the one who should win it personally. Um, I wouldn't hate Miranda, so I'll give Helena the plus, but I'm gonna meet you halfway and also put an X next to it. We're doing one of these.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I wouldn't vote for Helena, but I know that unfortunately she's probably going to win it just because of the general player base maybe wants to invest into her. I agree that it's probably too late to put significant resources into her, but we never know. I mean, she could get like an amazing MA2 or limit burst upgrade and kind of bring her back. Shrek could even bring her back. Who knows? Um, but I think that Lucio is the de facto number one out of all these units. He's the most recent. He has upside coming in with Seifer, with Fina coming in as well. So yeah, I think that he's the best candidate there.
I'm actually gonna do this yes and no for Elia too, if you don't mind, because I don't know if I would tell most people, yeah, max rank your Elia, it's great. No, 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 no,
Yeah,
no. That's a poor investment at this time.
her time window is slipping, or at least at the top end of the game, it's past.
Yeah. Which brings us to Dark, which honestly, this doesn't look good. Are we sure there's no other Dark units we want to consider for the ring? I'm almost like second.
Times are tough for Dark and Winds the past year.
Uh,
It's real tough for Dark.
bro, this is so bad.
Like they need a significant permanent pool unit soon.
Maybe Knight of Ruinstern? I don't even know, man. Probably not. Definitely not. Definitely not. What am I thinking? So I'm gonna give Kitone the plus here because she is the best one here. It's not saying much. Though.
It's at least arguable with Raph. Like Raph probably has more playability right now than Katone, maybe. But the thing is, like, we just had Raph last year. A lot of the player base has her already. So it's probably a better choice to go for Catone, maybe. I don't know. You could go. I wouldn't fault somebody for voting for Raf though.
No, I wouldn't either. And I'll preliminary SR Little Leela, not there. And regular Dark Fina, way power crap. And I'm gonna do everyone a favor. Bronwell is very bad. I've done a fair amount of testing where applicable in the Greatsword meta here. Very bad. Even with the cost limited stuff, not even remotely competitive, and no reincarnation will help that.
I'm not as down on her as you are, but I also haven't really done that much mocking with her.
It's just she's got this really strong anti-pierce angle that's just completely unnecessary, and she gives a regen to the team, which is like okay, but like it doesn't heal enough. Her damage is very bad, and she's got no courage or re-raise in her kit at all. So she's a unit that gets very easily two-tapped in the modern era. That unless someone's given her re-raise externally, but that very few and far between. Yeah,
Like Lucielle.
maybe, maybe. But I think it's a pretty accurate picture of who our thumbs up are and general recommendations are of like sound choices.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the general takeaway here is the most recent unit for for each element kind of wins the day for pretty much all of them. And I think that if my general advice would be to vote for the newest units because they haven't had their upgrades yet. They are the most recent in terms of power creep, and that's who you want to be investing resources into at this point, not 2 years old units and things like that.
Definitely, and we will move on to uh, God. How do you even pronounce her name? Is it Shurrek?
It's
It's Shurrek.
Shurrek or
But
Shuriken or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
so we've been calling her Shrek for fun because it sounds like it. Someone in the comment made a section that she looks like Chevreuse, who is a Genshin Impact character, and obviously yes, she does. But we call her Shrek not because she looks like Shrek. We call her Shrek because the name sounds like Shrek. Let's get that straight. There's no physical resemblance, but uh, we will go
She
over
looks
her.
great.
She looks great. So no, screw it. We'll spoil a little bit. Go do the story, guys. Long story short, I'm not going to do a full spoiler. She's tied to Melnia, and she's part of a nation that we don't know a whole lot about, but they're connected to the Realm Scourge. And that's all I'm going to let you know. Very cool late game addition to the game lore wise. So the art, awesome. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the beauty mark there below the right eye.
Classic. I am
Nice
too.
touch.
It is a nice touch. So she's a wind unit, and we were actually just talking about this. Wind has been just just destroyed in the last year with how poor it's been. There's literally been nothing for any kind of copium for wind units. Ed Elric was honestly the last of them of like really good wind units. Veritas of the Heavens had the smallest window possible with Dario. That was over imminently. And the rest of these units not only underwhelmed, but the frequency of units. Ed Elric was over a year ago. You mean to tell me that we've only had four wind units in global, and Veritas of the Heavens is a free one, and technically Lena too, I think. Yeah, she was the free unit. So like, not even like really great competitive banner units. It's been the worst year ever for wind, and so she's coming in at 100 cost. Is a mage. She's a actual like magic user. No games, magic attacks and spirit scaling attacks. Her big thing, and I'll just kind of like recap the mainstay of her. Number one, two enormous game changing things about her. Number one, on her teammate buff, she has the capability to seal, dispel on enemies. Now, that's the thing what Volk has right now. Volk can seal the enemy capability to dispel buffs. This is a buff that not only gives it to herself, but gives it to teammates. So all three of your teammates can seal enemy dispel capability. Absolutely enormous balance changing buff in that regard. The other thing here is that she's a follow up unit like Gilgamesh. It's a very strong follow up in the sense that it dispels AP restore and haste. Where again, if you're looking at these units, AP restore is on Sephiroth, it's on King Mott, it's on Cypher technically, who's coming in here soon. Any kind of Zizabels. This solves a bunch of that AP restore issue, and obviously haste as well for any kind of follow up. So those are really like the two things I see that are probably the most impactful from a game perspective. But there's a lot more here, and I'll pause to let you give your thoughts as well.
She, so the first thing I was going to say is that, after not seeing a wind unit for so long, I think that Gumi was like, these aren't going to sell right now. We're in the middle of an ice meta. So we finally see the wind unit. We know that that's Gumi's signal that they're ready to overturn this ice/water meta that's been going on for the last 4 to 5 months or 6 months or whatever it is. The thing is, we're going to need Gilgamesh at this point to put out some damage against this unit, or she's poised to take over the game if not. But I think that there's at least some rock paper scissors that can happen where she's going to be extremely strong and is sort of designed to shut down Ashen King Mont, to shut down Sephiroth. She has the curse resistance built in, and she has the follow-up attack to kind of kill Courage or kill Re-Raise, even if she gets sealed or something like that. She's also going to be pretty strong against Seifer and some of these other kind of physical bulky bruisers. She's got the healing power debuff of I think up to 70, on one of the attacks also.
Yep.
She's got the big physical barrier. Very, very strong kit here. Competitive, with the other units we've seen of this generation. It's just finally Wynn's turn to get one. And it's like some of these other units we've seen recently. It should technically bring back some of the older units of this generation to kind of put up a fight against her. Honestly, I think that she's going to be very strong even against Joom, who's like very anti-magic. But, a lot of us have been trying to build Joom not really anti-magic lately. So if you kind of catch Joom off guard, she can probably kill her. But if you kind of tune your team into anti-magic, maybe then you have that rock, paper, scissors kind of effect that we like to see in PvP.
Totally. And just to recap a couple things, one of the reasons that she counters Ashen King Mont is not only the element matchup, that's definitely part of it, but the dispel of the follow up, certainly a big part of it. And what was the other thing?
The haste and the AP restore also.
Yeah, so
very
that's what I meant exactly. Thank you. And then the Sephiroth angle is not only the curse resistance, but the dispel re-raise on this select two. Sephiroth does not typically have a way to seal re-raise on enemies most often. I know technically Volk can, but you don't see that pairing all that often. And so right now Sephiroth's kind of exposed, and this is a great way to kind of get around that. The other noteworthy thing is that she is kind of an immobilized centric character. And in our Discord, we went a real deep back and forth with Brad Strong Earth, who some of you might know, and it's a really good conversation. This immobilized chance is technically like Ashen King Mont. She gets an extra 15% applied when her honeycomb barrier buff is online. So it's really a 50% chance to immobilize. And I'll give my take on why I like it, and then you can give yours on the honeycomb interaction. Sure. But for me, I've actually always really liked Immobilize because you stymie the enemies from A, being able to position themselves for optimal teammate affinity, for agility, luck, and dex. It affects everything. It disproportionately affects characters like tanks, where you can nail them down in a position, and all of a sudden their teammates are outpacing them in a way that you don't like. Now we have two different supports. Maybe you can lock down the supports outside of a healer range. They can't do anything. I also like it too, just for the perspective that you don't allow them to maximize their damage. And I'll use someone like Sephiroth as an example. If you can immobilize a Sephiroth, that's likely the difference between him being able to get all three of your units in his curse limit break, or maybe just one of your units in the curse limit break, because he can't move to optimally position to get that damage done. So immobilize has a ton, an auto in particular, effects on the AI in terms of mitigating what they like to do. So I'll pause there because you have a very good take on it, as well as why it's important for her.
So I will say, just kind of the devil's advocate to your point, yes, is that
because there's a devil's advocate. There is.
Yeah, there. So I mean, it's something that I've seen even on auto, and I'm sure other people have seen it. Brad brought it up. Is that the immobilized does have the potential to actually bone the AI in terms of, maybe you immobilize the tank and then all of your units go up to hit that tank, and they can only hit the tank at that point, and then the DPS of the enemy are in your back line, and that can kind of work against you in some scenarios. I would say that that is maybe the lesser chance that that happens. It certainly can happen, and it does, but I think the upside sort of outweighs the negative there. The other thing that I brought up is that this unit does have the honeycomb barrier, and this immobilize effect synergizes perfectly with the honeycomb barrier because hers is something that we'll see with Squall when we get Final Fantasy VIII. Gumi did upgrade Squall's force barrier on the range. It goes from 2 to 5 range rather than 4 to 7 range. It makes it much more effective as a barrier. And Shurrek here is getting that innately right off the bats. So if she immobilizes somebody, within say that 5 range, now all of a sudden she's got that permanent 40% mitigation because nobody in the game can break a honeycomb barrier except for Shurrek.
Yes.
So, and she can only break magical versions. I think it's on her limit burst. So
That's correct.
I thought that was another really interesting kind of X's and O's thing about it.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And I do like, there's more to talk about penetration wise, accuracy, et cetera, et cetera. But I think two noteworthy things that I was looking at was A, she's the first unit in the game with unit res pen. We've had unit crush, but we've never really had the penetration. And I like this better than the crushes for the simple reasons that number one, with a crush, you can debuff weakening the effectiveness of the crush. Two, a character like Fina, we were just talking about, that can, seal your debuff capability. This penetration, you don't seal that. That's just natural. That's just always going to do the damage you want it to do. And so I think this is naturally a little bit more stronger than a unit res crush that you're just going to permanently penetrate 30% of it. And there's no, we see like slash pen down and defense pen down and things like that. There's no unit pen down in the game, and it's probably not going to be here for quite a long time. So I do like this angle, not only for these select two abilities, but for her follow-up attack. All of these will amplify the damage of all of that. So I do like that immensely. And the second thing, is her alternative ability here. I think this is a really interesting second attack. That it is a single target or an attack. It's a typeless damage, which I was trying to recap. I don't think it's been since Vivi that we've had a typeless damage. And there's a couple characters as of late. Did someone else come to mind? Because I couldn't think of anyone.
Vivi sounds right. I can't think of any other ones since then.
Yeah.
Other than like follow-up attacks, which
Right.
are typeless by nature.
Right. But yeah, I was going through these characters. I think Vivi was the last one with a typeless damage, which, there's pros and cons because you don't get the elemental attack up, which so many Espers have, which so many mono element teams have. But the benefit of that is that things like your 5% all element res on a trust stone don't apply. The 7% doesn't apply. Your Espers don't apply. So you get a benefit, and there are units as of late that have all element resistance. Like Ashen King Mon, I think, is one of them, right? That he has all element res in his kit, and this just ignores it. So not only does it have the benefit of the typeless, but this 38% magic imperil, which people aren't really gearing for anymore. You were in the Helena meta because that limit break was just destroying you. I don't see a meta right now where people are going to suddenly jack up their magic resistance again for this one single attack that maybe you see a Shurrek somewhere in the game once in a while. So I think she's going to catch a lot of people off guard with the Imperil and the typeless damage here as a form of damage.
Especially with the absorb
Right.
tacked on there also.
Right. Which stacks
And
with their buff, which will absorb.
stacks with her self buff.
Right.
Yep. And she does have like the bravery angle, so she's very anti-physical with the barrier, the bravery down, all that stuff. So she's gonna be a strong unit in the meta. I was also thinking that, I was saying this earlier, that prepare for a very strong lightning unit incoming soon because this unit so thoroughly shuts down what Earth can do right now, and especially what King Mont can do, that she's the ultimate protection and sort of bouncer for any lightning unit that comes in, whether that's lightning katana, whether it's lightning spear, lightning missile, whatever, and protects you from one of the best units in the game, which is Ashen Mont.
Yes, completely agreed. But I think that's everything we wanted to cover. I don't think there's anything more. I know there's more to cover. There's definitely more. The sub jobs, I like these sub jobs. There's a lot of good stuff here, but we'll pause, I think.
We'll save some stuff for when she actually comes to global.
Yeah, exactly. But answer a couple of questions here. Someone asked, who was it? Xena Warrior Prince, that we're both in Howl. Yes, we've been in the same guild for I don't know, 7 months. I joined back in December, I think it was. So it's been a
Yeah.
really good time. But um,
Yeah, you weren't originally when we first started the podcast, you were still in Visipur and then retired.
yep,
And then yeah, you joined back in December. So yeah, we've been having fun, chilling out, talking about the game, and yeah, we got a good group of folks that it's been a lot of fun.
we do. My favorite stat of joining Howl, I'll still, I love bringing this up. It's literally a non-factor. Trust me, guys. This means nothing. There's no correlation. Damn it! Why can't I zoom properly? I love this. The day I joined in December was like right here. Like the day I joined, how it went from like perpetual number 10 up to like number 5. I'm not saying that's a coincidence. It's a coincidence, guys. I'm not that good, but
Uh,
it's been a lot of
I love it.
we've had a lot of really good days here in that time since I've joined. So it's been a good experience.
I love it.
Uh,
Especially now that some other folks have joined us in Gemini too, where we don't have to go through the ringer of Choco Boss, Ashura, and Final Boss every week. We can
right.
at least sometimes avoid them now.
Right. Yeah, you guys in chat, the way matchmaking works for Guild Wars is that you get matched within +8 or -8 of your rank, but it gives preference to those that are in your same tier. So Gemini 1, Aries 1, whatever it might be. And so there are times where we get grouped in a Gemini league with these top 3. And so the game prioritizes us queuing against them, which are not very fun days. But as more people rank up and get within those same leagues, and you can apply this to your own Guild Wars if anyone's curious how the matchmaking works. Just go in and see who's above and below you. 8 ranks. You will never play anyone within 5 days of playing them last. So everyone has a 5 day cooldown from the last day you've played them, and the game gives preference to your rank. So it's pretty simple to be honest in terms of how the matchmaking works.
Yeah.
But this is the time. We're at an hour and 20. We are winding down. We'll kill some time, but we'll give a quick opportunity. We mentioned at the beginning, if anyone has any questions here toward the end of the stream, burning Q&A you want to ask. We haven't really done a ton of Q&A as of late with the live stream format, but figured give us an opportunity. If those of you that have balance questions, trivia questions, shoot, you can ask what we had for lunch, whatever you want. Numero, the guild rank number 1 is not technically a Japanese guild. I think they're Chinese. They're called a Asura Vision, though, if you were to translate that, though. And, yeah, but they're on the global server, obviously, yeah.
Yeah. Very strong guilds. There was a question I noticed here from Andrew a few minutes ago where he says, my account's stuck. I got Ceph and Cloud, 2 of the VCs from Advent Children. However, I have no Black Mage power for Shurrek and no Sword Warrior things for the Seifer or Fina combo. So it sounds like maybe you're like a newer or somewhat newer. At this point, the meta is more or less being reset, basically since Jum and Mont came in for us a couple months ago. So at this point, we're like in the collection phase. We're collecting assets and we're putting them together in different configurations. At this point, I would say, grab the units that speak to you or maybe work well with the units that you've pulled before. So that could be a support for you. Maybe you look ahead towards Black Mage. There are like some good cards before Black Mage that are already, within the VC pool. Unfortunately, one of the best ones, which is the VV Vision card, is limited time. So that's unfortunate. Like if you were trying to put together like a pure Black Mage team. But think about like Black Mage does work with the Tifa Vision card, which the one with Tifa and Cloud on it. Not sure if that was one of the ones that you pulled, but that's a card that you could fit in like with your Cloud and Shurrek on the same team, for example.
Absolutely. And I don't know if I would say the count stock. Sephiroth and Cloud are 2 great units. You could still default to some mono element stuff if you want. I know light element vision cards are among the best in the game. The fire ones, not so much. The fire vision cards are pretty bad, quite honestly. Permanent pool. But those are 2 great teams, and Katana's got enough. I think your count's fine. Maybe you just don't pull on Fina, Cypher, or Shurrek, to be honest. I think there's enough in the permanent pool with like Jum and other units that you could work them in with Cloud and still be fine.
100%.
Someone else here had a good question. Oh, what element do you think the summer and Halloween units will be? Now, Halloween, way too far away. I can't even. It's going to totally depend on the game balance. But if I had to predict summertime, Lightning. I'm gonna go lightning. I'm gonna say lightning, and I only say that too because lightning has a history of being very. Oh, one second, guys. Hold on, hold on. What am I sharing here? Sorry, you're seeing what's the screens. I have a really good infographic that I'd put together about lightning. That oh, is it gone? I'm sorry, guys, it's gone. That almost all the good lightning units are limited, and that just tends to be a
Yeah.
trend. If you were to remove the permanent pool, I mean, remove the limited lightning units, they're all trash. This element sucks from a permanent pool perspective. So summer's probably lightning if I had to guess.
Yeah, and a summer unit's not going to help that situation actually, but
No,
I do agree that the cold triangle, which is your earth, your water, and your ice, has been living large here for basically the whole first 6 months of this year. We are transitioning into the warm triangle, which is your fire, your wind, and your lightning. And we did get Lucielle. Yeah, obviously, that was the first lightning, or we are getting Lucielle this week. That's going to be the first shoe to drop for lightning, but she's a rainbow unit, like you were saying. Like she can go anywhere. It's not necessarily unsurmountable, for water to fight against Lucielle, although she does make it very hard. I think that we're due definitely for like a lightning DPS unit, whether that's summer or whether that's the new spear units in JP. I don't know, but it's as good a guess as any, I think.
I do think Dark is a good candidate too. I
Yeah.
think Wind with Shrek being as recent as she is would be a tough for them to go Wind. But then again, summer technically should be like a month away from now. It shouldn't be in July. I think historically it's been like right on the beginning of August. So we technically have a couple of weeks. So maybe that is a wind unit, and there's enough of a gap between Shurrek that maybe it is a wind unit. But I think Dark's a good
It could
candidate
be
too.
could be fire as well to maybe bolster the accounts that just pulled Sephiroth, maybe newer players that want to kind of build upon that synergy. Um, I don't know, but I think that the warm elements are definitely the biggest candidates.
Definitely. Good question there. A couple other ones here, just pouring through. Would you collect cards over units until FF8? I would tend to say yes. I think vision cards tend to be better investments, particularly if we're talking about permanent pool units. Pull the vision cards. They're a lot harder to get later. They're a lot harder to max later, although you can't use the stars anyway. So, oh, let me wait. Let me walk that back. The Mog Shop medals do apply for vision card stuff. So if a vision card gets dropped on the next month's reset, you can exchange your Mog Shop medals or whatever you want to call them for those vision card charts for hollows. So yeah, I would go vision cards over units. Absolutely.
First of all, for everybody that doesn't do this, make sure you do this. 100% always buy the shards for Gil, not only for units but for vision cards as well, because like you said, you can always build them up later off banner, and if you haven't got those 80 free shards, that's gonna put you behind significantly with how much you have to put into it. Because unfortunately, we still can't use stars, and who knows if they're ever going to change that. Um, my one caveat to your response, but I do agree with it. My one caveat there would be if it's a primary card, I would be more willing
Yes.
to
Yes.
invest in it. If it's an agility card, if it's something like with wide res or area resist, um, yeah, I would be more apt to try to. If it's also like a team that you can see yourself playing, like if it's a bow vision card and you're not going to have any interest in pulling bow units, let it slide. But if it's Katana or one of these other groups that you have invested into the units, you probably want to grab it.
Great caveat. I couldn't agree more. That's a really good thing to put on. We'll move along here because we're getting a lot of good ones here. Someone asked about a male summer unit. We did vote on our top favorite summer unit candidates. I don't remember who I said to be honest, but I know Engelbert was one of them. I can't. I think I listed another male though. Do you remember who we were talking about?
I could have sworn it was Englebert, but maybe you said somebody else.
I think I did. We'll go. We'll get back to that. It was a recent podcast. We were doing top five candidates for summer
Was it
units.
Seymour?
I don't.
Seymour or Adelard?
I
No.
don't think so.
I know that I
Shoot,
voted for Satya and Perrine, I think.
it's a good one. Oh, it's gonna kill me. I'm sorry, guys. I'll have to like post it.
Velis? Was it Velis?
I don't think so. That'll come to me. I'll think about it later. But keep moving along here. Sorry, guys. Another good one here. Oh, hmm. No, maybe that's it.
Shogun
Yeah, Shogun's
Shogun
asking
said
about. Go ahead.
your thoughts on Orange's recent video that Wotive Global didn't make as much during the Final Fantasy VII Advent Children collaboration.
Garukin, I think, posted out a good point that the video only covered revenue that was half the month. We don't have the collab was spread out over 2 months, and so looking at 1 month in a silo is not exactly accurate to the collab. Then again, the numbers I saw didn't look that bad. I mean,
Yeah, so I think those are the two caveats. Like, for one thing, I think the sensor tower data was incomplete, where it was missing, I think, from some days in June. So that was partially impacting it. But that was impacting, I think, a lot of games. The second factor is, yes, we got Cloud in May and we got Sephiroth in June. So the collab was kind of across that whole period. And we kept a consistent value of, I think, 700K a month. I think honestly that's kind of where we're living. Like we're consistently kind of within that 6 to 700K a month, and that's we have a players still that kind of consistently spend on the game, and I don't think there's going to be huge swings in that unless something catastrophic happens or we get some huge influx of Addison Ray fans to the game.
right. No, totally, totally. I think that's basically where this probably stops. So we've had a couple other small questions, but we are at an hour and a half, so probably gonna cut it here. But we will continue to do the Q&A going forward. So guys, keep your questions saved, and we'll always look to address them. But I think we're gonna pause now. We'll look to see if there's any news update this week, or if it's just gonna be next week, which we're predicting. But I think it's everything we want to talk about.
Yeah, I think that covers the gamut. I did like this format. I like that we did the kind of rapid fire questions at the end. So let's stick to that cadence going forward.
Definitely. But for now, thanks again for watching, everybody. Appreciate the time. And per usual, good luck pulling on whatever it may be.